Well, happy Tuesday, everyone, and welcome to the final Portage webinar under the Carl banner. Today, we are going to be learning about how to support your research with DMP Assistant 2.0, which is a great way to wrap up this part of the Portage webinar series. My name is Jennifer Abel. I am the training coordinator with the Portage Network, and I'd like to acknowledge that the land which I'm speaking to you from today is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. In today's webinar, data management plans, or DMPs, are one of the foundations of good research data management. Hosted by the University of Alberta Library and supported by the Portage Network, the DMP Assistant is a national, open, bilingual data management planning tool to help researchers better manage their data throughout the lifespan of a project. The tool develops a DMP by prompting researchers to answer a number of key data management questions, supported by best practice guidance and examples. Building on the preceding DMP-focused webinar, which we'll put a link for into the chat in just a couple minutes, this session will be of interest to researchers, graduate students, librarians, and research support stakeholders. We're going to take an in-depth look at the newly launched DMP Assistant 2.0, including all of its enhanced key features for both end users and institutional administrators, as well as a brief look at the future of the platform. But a few housekeeping notes before we get started with that. You have been muted automatically when you entered the room. This webinar is being recorded and the chat may be archived for those who are unable to attend. We encourage you to use the latest version of Zoom so that you have access to all of the features, including security updates. You'd think I'd know how to say all of this by now, but apparently not. Please use the chat feature if you're having technical difficulties or have additional resources to share. And please use the Q&A option to ask questions of the presenter. Questions will be addressed at the end. You may also raise your hand if you wish to ask a question, and questions may be asked in English or in French. We do have a code of conduct that we follow here for all of our webinars. Carl and the Portage Network are committed to providing a welcoming, safe, and harassment-free environment for its staff, membership, committees, and working groups, as well as for participants, speakers, and organizers of Carl meetings and events. We do not tolerate harassment of any kind. And our presenter today is Robin Nicholson, who is my colleague, the Data Management Planning Coordinator for the Portage Network. Before coming to Portage, she completed an internship with Research Data Canada, where she expanded her knowledge of the Canadian research ecosystem and deepened her understanding of how data management planning supports and improves research processes and outputs. So she's a great person to be talking about all of this. She also worked on various RDM-related projects as part of a research assistantship with Dr. Mike Smith at Dalhousie University. She's a recent graduate of the Master of Information program at Dalhousie and also did a Bachelor of Arts in English and Music History. And yes, you can tell by the posters in her background, she is a big music fan. So definitely thumbs up to that. And Robin, the virtual floor is now yours.
Thanks so much, Jen. What an introduction. You'll give me 1 second. I'll share my screen here. All right, is that looking okay for everyone?
Looks good.
All right. So thanks so much, Jen, and hello, bonjour. Thanks again for joining us. I'm very happy to present today's session on how to support your research with the DMP Assistant 2.0 platform. Before we start, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that I am coming to you today from Ukjibuktuk in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. Here's a little preview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to start with a very brief introduction to data management plans, or DMPs. As some of you may know, last week, my colleague James Doran of the University of Alberta presented the first in this two-part series on supporting your research through data management planning and the DMP Assistant. And his session explored DMPs in great detail. So I will only very briefly recap them here just to get us started. If you missed James's session, not to worry, the slides and recording will be available shortly. I would highly recommend checking those out. Next, we will hone in on the star of the show, the DMP Assistant platform, with an introduction to the platform itself and the new features available in our new and improved 2.0 version that was officially launched earlier this month. Building on where James left us at the last session, we will start with a walkthrough of creating a DMP in the platform, along with general end user features. A lot of the new features in 2.0 are on the administrative side, so next we will take a look at some of the institutional administrator features. Finally, I'd like to take a moment at the end of this session to take a look at the future of the DMP Assistant and even wax a little poetic on the exciting possibilities for DMPs in the near future, such as machine actionable DMPs, which is quite a hot topic. But for now, without any further ado, on y va. So as I mentioned last week, James took us through an amazing deep dive into DMPs, their importance and their contents. So this is simply to serve as a recap, a refresher for those well-versed in DMPs, a brief introduction for those who are new to DMPs, or just joining us for this second session in the series. Data management planning is a key pillar of research data management, and at its center are, you guessed it, data management plans, or DMPs. Just as having a clear plan is key to many pursuits in life, DMPs are one of the foundations of good research data management. Put simply, a DMP is a formal document which clearly articulates the strategies and tools you will implement to effectively manage your data, speaking to the management of the data both during the active phases of your research and after the completion of the research project, and everything in between. Ideally, a DMP is treated as a living document that can be modified throughout your project to reflect any changes that have occurred. The overall objective is to address issues related to data management prior to starting your research project. Think of it like mapping out your journey and itinerary before leaving for a big trip. You remember traveling, right? For more information on DMPs, be sure to check out our brief guides and primer on the subject. James highlighted these last week, and the links will be in the chat. So, because this would not be a webinar presented on the topic of research data management without a life cycle, here we are. Research data management in a broad sense refers to the management of data throughout all phases of the research lifecycle. And a DMP starts in the planning phase of research, seen here in red, as you start writing your proposal, funding applications, and starting up your project. But a DMP can also speak to the management of data during the active phases of your research, here in blue, extending from collection, analysis, and sharing of data through to the end of the project. As a living document, a DMP also extends well beyond the planning and active phases, remaining useful well after the completion of the research project through archiving and discovery, for example. Here is another life cycle for good measure, but one with a slightly different spin. A DMP provides information across key research lifecycle categories, from data collection to documentation and metadata, storage and backup, sharing and reuse, all the way through to preservation, while also considering important issues surrounding ethics and legal compliance, as well as responsibilities and resources along the way. As we'll see a little later, all 7 of these categories are section headings employed in the default Portage DMP template within the DMP Assistant. James also went into the details of each of these categories in great detail last week, so be sure to check that out if you'd like to learn more. Usually we see these life cycles represented in a perfect circle, each stage flowing neatly into the next. But I also like this alternative or infinity pattern, in this case, partly because, as we all know, life cycle stages don't always progress so neatly and chronologically, and also because, particularly in the context of a DMP, you're thinking about all of these stages at once, and planning not only for the near future, i.e. the conclusion of your research project, but arguably for the foreseeable future as well in terms of preservation after your project is complete. While often these categories are presented in chronological order, when completing a DMP using the DMP Assistant, you don't necessarily have to complete them chronologically. Sometimes details in one section may emerge earlier and easier than others. As I mentioned, a DMP should be considered a living document, and nothing says living like infinity. So, why DMPs? Why invest your valuable time in mapping out your research project instead of diving right into the research itself, the fun stuff, right? Well, for starters, writing a DMP is good practice, an established international best practice even, because it helps you think ahead and map out how you will manage, describe, analyze and store and share your data. They can also help to identify areas for improvement and questions that need to be answered, and even reduce the overall cost of your research by increasing efficiencies in the long term. In these ways and more, DMPs are also practical. A DMP provides you and others with a record of what you intend to do from the very beginning, or alternatively, remind you of what you intended to do in the first place when you revisit it later on. And if all of that sound reasoning isn't enough, a DMP will also be required, or they already are required in some cases. DMPs are increasingly required by funders in a variety of global contexts, including here in Canada. As many of you will be aware, the long-awaited Tri-Agency Research Data Management Policy was officially launched this month, and data management plans are one of 3 main pillars included in that policy, along with institutional strategies and deposit of data. By spring 2022, only a year from now, the agencies will identify the initial set of funding opportunities subject to this DMP requirement, and they'll also pilot these requirements in targeted funding opportunities before this date. But in the meantime, Portage is focused on making DMPs as straightforward and as unburdensome as possible for researchers via the development of guidance resources, as well as the continued improvement to the DMP Assistant platform. A link to the Tri-Agency RDM policy will be in the chat. So, if you are tuning in today, chances are you are already familiar with the Portage Network and all that we do, but in case you are new, hello, welcome. Allow me to introduce us. The Portage Network is a national research data management initiative launched in 2015 by the Canadian Association of Research Libraries to contribute to the shared stewardship of research data and address specific gaps in national research data management infrastructure in Canada. The heart and soul of Portage is our network of experts who are critical in developing resources, expert advice, and practical help to assist with the management of research data at every stage of the data lifecycle. Here we see a more traditional circular lifecycle in this case. Driving our support for data management planning practices in Canada is the Portage Data Management Planning Expert Group, or DMPEG as it is affectionately known. Among other activities, the DMPEG develops and makes available guidelines, best practices, and content in support of templates and guidance materials for the Portage National DMP service, the DMP Assistant, which we will look at next. For more information on the network of experts or the DMPEG, see the links in the chat. So just for reference, here we see the homepage of the Portage Network website. From the top menu, you can see all of the various expert groups in the network of experts, including the DMPEG. Below, you can click on the DMP Assistant logo to be taken directly to the platform, which is where we're going very soon. And now, the guest of honor. Hosted by the University of Alberta Library and supported by the Portage Network, DMP Assistant is a national, open, bilingual data management planning tool to help researchers better manage their data throughout the lifespan of a project. The tool develops a DMP by prompting researchers to ask a number of key data management questions supported by best practice guidance and examples. This tool is free to use, regardless of institutional affiliation or non-affiliation. The link to the DMP Assistant can be found in the chat. Just for some context and background, the original DMP Assistant was adapted from the Digital Curation Center's DMP online tool with a French user interface initially produced with support from the University de Montréal Library. DMP Assistant 2.0 uses the DMP roadmap codebase developed by DCC and the University of California Curation Center, or UC3, who also hosts the DMP tool platform in the States. So with the DMP Assistant, researchers can create project plans using a generic template or an institution, discipline, or methodology specific template, see guidance appropriate to the particular template they're using, collaborate with multiple researchers on a plan, and connect with local guidance and support for data management at their academic institutions. Alternatively, institutions can customize the default Portage template for their institution, as well as a suite of discipline and methodology specific templates that are in the making. Create institution-specific templates and guidance, and view information about DMP assistant usage at their institution. Now, if I could get a drum roll, please. After months, even years in the making, we were delighted to launch the DMP Assistant 2.0 earlier this month on March 3rd. Celebrations are hardly what they used to be given the current pandemic situation, but this launch was a very long time in the making and the product of a lot of hard work and tireless efforts. So a huge thank you and congratulations to our colleagues on the development team at the University of Alberta, as well as members of the Portage Secretariat and the network of experts who contributed to this project in various ways along the way. On a more personal note, having been part of this team for only a few short months since starting with Portage in October of last year, I'm so grateful to have been able to participate in such an incredible and ambitious project. It is no small feat and it's truly a labor of love, so I'm very grateful and humbled to be involved. Version 2.0 has several new features and benefits, including the ability to clone or copy DMPs for similar projects, the ability for institutions to create more flexible DMP templates in terms of institutional customization, as well as enhanced template development functions such as cloning, use of phases and themes, and working from a range of new discipline and methodology specific templates, as well as new usage statistics dashboards for institutional administrators. So let's take a look at some of these new features in action. This is what you see when you first land on the DMP Assistant homepage. The link is in the chat for those interested. I will mention that there's a bit of a facelift in the works for this landing page. Now that our new features and functions, bells and whistles are all mostly up and running, we can start to focus on some of the more aesthetic details. For instance, I would love to get a very pretty life cycle on this homepage, or perhaps a photo of my colleague James's brand new puppy, for example. But for the time being, you will see there are a variety of links and tabs to get you started, many of which are coming from our code-based collaborators and partners globally. From here, you can sign in with existing credentials or create a new account. If your organization is not listed, you are also able to enter your own by selecting "My organization isn't listed" here. As our user base expands, so will our institution list. New organizations are being added all the time. Version 2.0 also features enhanced bilingualism, supported by recent upgrades to the original DMP roadmap codebase in collaboration with the Digital Curation Center. These upgrades will improve internationalization and multilingual support, not only for the DMP Assistant, but for other instances of the DMP roadmap codebase globally, of which there are several. Portage and the University of Alberta Library DMP Assistant team also employed professional translation services with subsequent expert validation to help ensure an enhanced and truly bilingual service. There are always improvements to be made where bilingualism and quality of translation are concerned. However, we've made great strides since the 1.0 version, and we will continue investing in the true bilingualism of this service. It is also interesting to note that of all the global instances of the DMP roadmap codebase, we are actually the first to implement an integrated translation feature of this kind, which is pretty cool. Being the first to do anything it comes with its own set of trial and errors, but as we continue to learn from our experience and report back to our DMP roadmap collaborators and counterparts, hopefully we can pave the way for other multilingual integrations. The link to the French interface is also in the chat. So the next few slides were graciously lent to me by my colleague James, hence the University of Alberta logo. I'll be pretending to be a University of Alberta user for the next little while. Once you're signed in, you will see your dashboard, or my dashboard, where you can either access an existing DMP, if you have one, or in James's case, several, or you can create a new plan by selecting the Create Plan button at the bottom of your dashboard. A brand new feature for end users in 2.0 is the ability to copy or clone existing DMPs for use with similar projects or funder requirements, for example. Once you've copied a DMP, you can go in and make the necessary changes or adjustments as normal, but with all of your content and project details pre-filled from your existing DMP. It's a simple new feature, but definitely super handy and time-saving. Each DMP has study level information associated with it under the project details tab, such as funder, grant number, ID, as well as general fields like title, abstract, and principal investigator, for example. You are also able to adjust the visibility of your DMP to be private, public, only viewable by your organization, or simply for test purposes. You will notice that this particular example is actually a fictional DMP exemplar that James created for mixed methods research involving surveys and interviews or focus groups. The full text of this exemplar is actually published and available on the Portage Zenodo, along with a suite of other discipline and methodology specific exemplar DMPs. These examples provide a really helpful reference point for researchers in writing their own DMPs, especially if they've never seen one before. It can be really helpful. So the links to this exemplar are in the chat. Moving our way over to the Write Plan tab, these section headings will look familiar as they were the ones included in my research lifecycle infinity loop from earlier in the presentation. From this collapsed overview here, you can see how many questions are included in each section and how many you have answered thus far. As you can see, James is a very diligent researcher and has already answered all 22 of the questions included in the default Portage DMP template. Great job, James. And if we expand one of these sections, you can see what an average question looks like for the end user when writing their plan. Dedicated space as well as customized guidance is provided for each question. Institutions may customize this guidance based on institutional preferences, but we will get into that a little later. Here you can see the answer James has provided is in more of a traditional narrative or paragraph style. However, you also have the ability to create a bulleted list, numbered lists, tables, hyperlinks, or mark up your text as you see fit. You are also able to add collaborators to your DMPs and communicate with them throughout the writing process of the DMP. This is not only a great collaborative and interactive feature, it also encourages the treatment of the DMP as a living document to return to and comment on an ongoing basis. You also have a built-in history of the discussion surrounding its creation, thus adding a layer of context for future iterations. Speaking of collaboration, under the Share tab, you can easily add collaborators to your DMP with varying permission settings as appropriate. Again, you can set the overall plan visibility depending on how widely you'd like to share your DMP. Finally, under the Downloads tab, a range of options are available for both formatting and downloading your DMP. This way, you can download your shiny new completed DMP for submission to funders, ethics boards, or simply to frame and hang on your wall next to your degrees, as I'm sure you all do. With some file format options, such as the Word doc or docx, you will be able to complete additional formatting to your heart's content once downloaded to your local device. It's really up to you or your funder requirements, for example. Okay. Now let's take a look under the hood at some of the administrative features of the DMP Assistant 2.0. Institutional spaces are created within the DMP Assistant for various post-secondary institutions, research groups, or other research-affiliated organizations. Individual users affiliated with an organization can be designated as the local DMP Assistant Administrator and assigned organizational admin permissions, which allows them to do a few things behind the scenes. Organizational admin, as an organizational local administrator, you can edit the organization details, view basic information for users associated with your organization, such as email address, last time of login, and the number of plans they've created. You can create, edit, manage, and delete organization-specific templates, and you can create, edit, manage, and delete organization-specific guidance for those templates. Administrators can access these features from their admin drop-down menu, seen here. If you are already a local administrator for your institution, lucky you. Once signed in, your dashboard will already feature this admin menu. If you're logged in and you don't see this admin dropdown, chances are you might need admin permissions added to your account. If you need such permissions, if it's appropriate at your role at your institution, shoot myself or the support team a message and we can go from there. Our contact details will be in the chat. In the meantime, let's dig into these features a little more. First of all, local administrators can view plans from users at their organizations from the plans page. Pretty simple. Moving on down to the templates page, administrators can also view all available templates belonging to their institution. Right here. Or you can choose to create a new institution-specific template entirely using the Create a Template button at the bottom of the dashboard. Administrators can also customize Portage templates to feature local guidance from the Customizable Templates tab here. Local guidance can be added via the Guidance page from the Admin menu. The Portage template seen here can be regarded as a generic DMP template that can be used out of the box by any researcher. Not all institutions will need nor want to develop an institutional template, but the functionality is there for those who feel it is important for their organization. Customization of templates, as well as organizational profiles, could easily fill an entire webinar by themselves, and they soon will. But in the interest of time, we are going to stick to the highlights of the new administrative features in the DMP Assistant 2.0. For those institutions wishing to provide customized templates and organizational profiles to meet specific needs, more in-depth guidance on institutional customization is available in this customization guide that was put together in 2016. The link is in the chat. A fulsome update of this document reflecting all of the new bells and whistles in the 2.0 platform is currently being undertaken by a working group with the Portage Data Management Planning Expert Group I mentioned earlier. So keep an eye out for that in the coming months, along with accompanying training materials such as a webinar. On the topic of templates, something new for both end users and administrators are a suite of brand new discipline and methodology specific templates. These templates cover a range of disciplines and research methods, highlight best practices for DMPs in those disciplines, provide tailored guidance for researchers writing their own DMPs. Initiated by a funding call by Portage in April 2020, they are the result of a lot of hard work on the part of exceptional researchers, librarians, and information professionals in the Portage community, and members of the Portage Secretariat with whom they collaborated. Portage is pleased to have published 5 of these new templates in English and French thus far, with several more to come very soon. New DMP templates are now available covering advanced research computing, arts-based research, interdisciplinary health software and technology development, mixed methods for surveys and qualitative research, as well as qualitative health sciences research. These templates are available on the Portage website under training resources, as well as in the Portage Zenodo community. A note on the remaining new DMPs, as I imagine a few of our template authors might actually be on the call today. The remaining 8 templates have long been finalized, formatted for publication, and loaded into the DMP Assistant 2.0 platform, but we are taking a phased approach to their release just to allow for further verification of their professional translation. With our emphasis on bilingualism within the platform, we are taking some extra care and caution there. These remaining templates are primed for publication any day now, and a wide array of disciplines and methodologies will be represented, as you can see from this list. We are very excited to share these with the research community. Now, our 2.0 launch would not have been the big ambitious launch that it was without a couple of hitches along the way. So while everything is up and running overall, we are currently encountering some issues with template customization and accessibility. Our development team has been working around the clock on these issues, and as such, soon our complete suite of new templates will be available for customization under the Customizable Templates tab of the Admin Templates page seen here. So stay tuned for that. For the time being, the Portage template, the default template, is always available for customization. As of today, 5 of the 13 new templates have been published in English and French in the DMP Assistant 2.0 platform, and we are working behind the scenes to improve their visibility and accessibility for both end users and administrators. In the meantime, you can take these new templates for a spin by creating a new plan and selecting the Portage Network as your primary organization. And as you can see, a drop-down menu appears with some of these new templates. Moving on down the admin drop-down options to organization details, local administrators can also edit the details for their organization, including adding a logo, website, and contact information like I have done here for Portage. Local admin can also view all of the users associated with their institution under the user accounts page, including details such as account creation date, last activity, and number of plans. Finally, a particularly exciting new administrative feature is our new usage statistics dashboard. Local admin can view the total number of users and plans at their institution, and more specific temporal statistics on their users, such as the number of users to join during the last year, and also the number of plans to be created during the last year. You will also see that all of these various statistics are downloadable as CSV files for various metrics reporting purposes. Further down in the usage statistics dashboard, local admin can also view the number of plans by templates, again broken down temporally by month. The large blocks of dark gray in this example are the default Portage template in comparison with other institutionally created templates. Again, you will notice that these statistics are downloadable, and you can also further specify by time period, seen here. Finally, at the very bottom of the usage statistics dashboard, administrators have the option to run their own custom searches of their usage statistics, either by users or plans, with a preferred date range and preferred organization. Again, the results of these searches are downloadable. So that brings us to the close of my rapid fire run through of the DMP Assistant platform. With 2.0 successfully launched and some post-launch fine-tuning now underway, we now find ourselves looking ahead to the future of the platform. In addition to the data management planning expert group I mentioned earlier, a DMP Assistant steering committee has also been established to provide essential guidance, support, and direction for the overall development, delivery, capacity, and sustainability of the DMP Assistant. Members represent and bring unique stakeholder perspectives and voices to the table, including not only Portage and our host institution, the University of Alberta, but also researchers, librarians, information managers, data stewards, and the tri-agencies. This group is dedicated to guiding the ongoing development and sustainability of the DMP Assistant. I will also mention that internally, we've developed a change request registry, or a features wish list, so to speak, where we have been tracking all user requests that come in for new functionality and upgrades to the DMP Assistant platform. Even if some of these changes can't happen overnight, we are certainly always listening to our users, and these kind of requests can be presented to our steering committee for consideration and prioritization into our development workflow in the coming months and maybe even years. Some of the new features that we're thinking about for the future include API integration with other systems, such as granting bodies, research ethics boards, and other use cases. Reviewing and evaluating DMPs. Building a DMP repository with DMP Assistant integration. DMP versioning, which is a big one. As well as the leveraging the power and potential of PIDs, or persistent identifiers. The DMP Assistant actually already allows for users to add their ORCID IDs to their profiles, but This use of identifiers could be expanded to include things such as RORs, or research organization identifiers, funder identifiers, grant identifiers, and even minted DOIs for the DMPs themselves. There's a lot to discuss here. We are also discussing more and more the improvement of machine actionability of DMPs, or MADMPs for short. MADMPs are a hot topic, and so I'm going to take a moment here just to highlight them in the next couple of slides. But in the meantime, if you'd like more information on the steering committee, it can also be found on the same page as the Data Management Planning Expert Group on the Portage website. Once again, the link is in the chat. So without getting into too much detail, as MADMPs can be quite a complex topic, data management plans normally are free-form narrative-style text documents that describe data that is used and produced during the course of research activities. Through the magic of metadata and with the help of persistent identifiers, the information from a DMP may actually be expressed in a machine actionable way, allowing for automatic exchange, integration, and validation of information provided in DMPs. This means that we can take a narrative style document that is certainly readable by us humans and express it in a more technical way that is equally readable by machines or computers. This machine actionability facilitates the exchange of information between systems, acting on behalf of stakeholders involved in the research lifecycle, such as researchers, funders, repository managers, and librarians, thus creating a rich web of linked information, such as in this diagram here. The idea is not only to facilitate the fairness of DMPs, so the findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability of DMPs as research objects, but can also lessen the administrative burden for everyone involved, researchers and funders alike. MADs are an emerging and very active area of work, and a group that is leading the way on this is the DMP Common Standards Working Group from the Research Data Alliance. This group has developed a metadata application profile that has already been employed in a variety of contexts globally to express information from traditional DMPs in a machine actionable way. If you're interested in MADMPs, I would encourage you to check out some of the work that this RDA group has produced. A couple of links will be added to the chat. Personally, I've recently been attending a couple of meetings of this working group, and it's really phenomenal what they're able to do with this standard. And the DMP Assistant 2.0 is actually already partially compliant with the DMP Common Standard, which puts us in an excellent position to pursue machine actionability in Canadian DMPs. So before I conclude my slides for today, I'd like to take a step back and appreciate the amazing community we are a part of. As service providers working from the open source our DMP roadmap codebase, we are part of a thriving global community of DMP tool providers. These are just a few examples from our collaborators at the Digital Curation Center and their DMP online tool in the UK, to the DMP tool in the States, DMP Opador in France, and UCT DMP, which is actually at University of Cape Town in South Africa. With this network of developers around the world, ambitious upgrades and improvements like machine actionability need not be pursued alone. And that concludes all of my slides for today. I must have spoken very quickly. That was a lot faster than in my test runs. But thanks so much for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I have some other members of the DMP Assistant team in attendance today as well, so I will do my best to field general questions, but I may call in back up for any particularly technical queries. So have at it.
Thanks so much, Robin. That was an excellent whirlwind tour of DMP Assistant. And a reminder that if you have questions, you can put them into the Q&A feature, or you can raise your hand. We do have a few questions in the Q&A already. And I'll start with one from Christy Thompson that has been getting a lot of support. I've been doing some research into the long-term researcher value of, just move down my list, the long-term researcher value of DMPs, as opposed to what librarians think the value will be. And the strongest assessment I could find says that an extensive literature review suggests that there is very limited published systematic evidence that DMP use has any tangible benefit for researchers, institutions, or funding bodies. And the papers that Christy is referencing are mentioned down below. So she's wondering what assessment the DMPEG has made of this topic and if they have other evidence.
That's a great question, Christy, and a great observation. In my shorter experience with DMPEG, I don't believe that we've looked into this from that kind of literature review perspective, but I think it would certainly be an excellent basis for a working group of the DMPEG. I think from a practical perspective, they just make sense. I think, and most librarians, I think, would agree that just from an organizational perspective, DMPs are common sense. But I think because they're still emerging as a best practice, that perhaps some of the literature and the research has not caught up. But I would welcome any other comments from my DMP assistant team on that.
Yeah, I can chime in on that for sure. But first, when you mentioned that the new pup's face might be on the landing page, I conversed with her. She is here and she is ready to negotiate something based on belly rub and treat compensation. She's fully into that. But now he's going to go nap again. It's a good question, Christy, and I'm familiar with that publication. I haven't looked at it for a little while, but I am familiar with it. I think the first thing to note, it's a publication from 2018. And much of the work on it was actually done in like 2016 into 2017, which in the big picture isn't that long ago, but in the DMP landscape and RDM landscape actually is quite a long time ago. If we go back to the earliest of 2016, Portage was a few months in. All of the work that has happened over the last 5-ish years is amazing. So I think that goes to speak to Robin's point that this is very early, really, when we think about it on the landscape. And benefits and metrics, there's many different ways of looking at it, and I think that's going to evolve as well. It's a part of a larger ecosystem, and I just want to keep this manageable from thinking about it, keep it to Canada even. We're literally now just a couple of weeks into the major policy release from the Triennial around research data management, which is going to then put forth things around institutional strategies, mechanisms in place that can support all of the things that I think will then lead downstream to the benefits. And those could be whether folks are if just thinking about a funded research model, are you getting grants? Are DMPs becoming a component? And as that matures and evolves and they become perhaps have a bigger role to play in determining, during the adjudication process for grant funding. For me, it's always just really about, are they helping researchers do their research? And a DMP is really an umbrella platform for all the different components across the research lifecycle that it contains. So if, again, if we go back to 5 years ago in Canada, we don't have a national service from Dataverse at that time that Scholars Portal is putting out. We don't have the federated research data repository. We don't have some of the things in between. So things are just really evolving. So I think it's a really good point. And I think to go to the DMPEG piece, that would, I agree, be a really, I think, an interesting and useful and worthwhile venture to take on by DMPEG. We've targeted some really kind of priority things to focus on that are more tangible to support, this right-of-way landscape around end users and our colleagues and administrators of DMP Assistant potentially across institutions. But that's the type of thing we could look at. And I think it'd be interesting actually to watch that longitudinally. And see how things evolve as a function of some of these higher level changes that we're seeing. And then as institutions start to develop and then actually implement all the mechanisms that support their institutional strategies. So I don't know if that entirely answered it, but yeah, it's a good question. And so we'll bookmark it. It seems like right now we have seemingly infinite number of things we can do and finite time and capacity. So that might actually be something that even might work well under the Andrio umbrellas, again, as things move forward. So.
Great, thank you, James and Robin. The next question is coming from Emma. and I will translate. If I understand well, there has to be a local administrator for DMP Assistant for an institution, but each researcher can create their own account. What would be the role of the administrator or the library in this context? So what's the difference between what the researcher is doing with their own account and what the administrator is doing?
So the administrator is working more behind the scenes as far as managing, editing, or creating customized guidance for templates, for example, for researchers at their institution to use, where obviously the researcher would be more focused on their own DMPs for their own individual research projects. And particularly with the 2.0, some of the new features are aimed at kind of metrics reporting for local administrators. So institutions can get a bird's eye view of what the usage of the DMP Assistant and what the usage of DMPs then is like at their institution. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything there.
No, I think
Seems like you covered it. Oh,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead, Wei Wei.
Yeah, I think you covered kind of the gist of the administrative kind of the responsibilities, because these are basically overlooking the entire kind of the use of the DMP Assistant tool, and individual researchers, of course, are only focusing on their own individual DMPs. So it has much bigger responsibilities per se, and actually help to guide your institution RDM practice through this tool.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lily.
Yeah, I just want to add from a technical point of view, the institutional administrator is the one who can grant user privileges to that user, and that includes access to the API for machine actionable DMPs.
Great, thank you. So there is a reason to have an administrator.
Absolutely.
I think is what you're all saying. Okay, good. A question here that I see Wei Wei maybe typing an answer for, but I'll read it out loud because a lot of people have upvoted it. Is it possible for DMP templates to include default values for DMP fields? So the template would include not just the question, but also answers.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you're creating a DMP, there is literally a field that is default answer, so you can add those. Those are included in other options for guidance and also example answers. So there's a variety of ways you can display the answers to any given question in a DMP on a template.
I'm just going to chime in though to say that the purpose of the DMP is to have folks think about their project, their data management planning, and so it's not to say that having some default answers to some text. There's actually some templates that are forthcoming that Robin spoke to that it makes perfect sense to do that, but we also want folks to think about it. And if you're just, the risk, I guess, of just putting in default answers if they're not truly meeting the needs of the project is just what we want to try to avoid. Similar as, folks have done ethics applications, for instance, and we're not by any means saying that's what folks are looking to do, but just again, we want folks to think about the data management aspect, because ultimately the end of the line is to support the research. And by doing so, you can support your research greatly. So.
Okay, I see a hand raised in the chat. Kathleen, I have allowed you to unmute yourself, so you can ask your question.
Okay, thank you. It's probably not a question. I just wanted to speak further about the issue that Christy has raised. And back in November, we had managed to get a group of Earth and Ocean Science grad students to have to draft a data management plan as part of their research proposal, as part of a class. And, Shahir and I gave a presentation, and the students were, as you can imagine, grumbling a bit. But what I came across right after the class actually was a webinar that aired live on November 20th, 2020. And I see that the link to the actual recording isn't functioning, so I'm not sure if it's still available to see. But the gist of it is that there was a group of Earth and Ocean Science grad students or postdocs, and they were having a summer community fellows program called Earth Science Information Partners, ESIP. And so they basically did a presentation on what we wish we had learned in grad school. And it was focused all around what they'd wished to learn, what they had wished to learn in grad school about data management and about data management planning. And there was supposed to be a roadmap that was going to be produced. I think, I'm just looking at these notes that I have in a LIDSERT. It said, the outcome of the session has been summarized as a roadmap that follows Data 1 data lifecycle. This roadmap projects the data lifecycle into the traditional grad school timeline and highlights the benefits and resources of data management training for each component of the data lifecycle. And this is supposed to be distributed as part of this ESIP community program, but I haven't looked into this further, but it might be something that the assessment group might want to check into. It was a very interesting recording, and I think listening to grad students talk about that's old question, the same thing they always tell us. I wish I'd known this sooner. It was quite interesting. But I just, the recording, my link to the recording is just taking me to the data site, not into the recording. So I'm not sure if it's available. Okay, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Kathleen.
Okay, I'll see if I can find, I've tried to look before, I know, but I just.
Yeah, it looks like
Exactly.
Yvette has put a link into there, and I will just put it into there. And everybody should be able to see it. Okay. A question from Allison. Apologies if I missed this, but when you were talking about the 5 DMP templates and soon 8 more that are available, if you choose Portage as your institution, did you mention when or how those will be available under specific institutions?
Very, very soon. I can't speak specifically to how, that's on the development team side, but we are working on it under the hood. And the idea will be that they will function the same way that the default Portage template functions, so that regardless of your institutional affiliation, you'll be able to have that as one of the options when you're creating a new plan, or be able to customize it if you're an institutional administrator. So like I said, we're working on that. We should have that figured out very shortly. It's just one of these post-launch hitches that we're addressing.
Yeah, I'll just add that there's a real value with that customization piece. So I love that we have the Portage, let's call those the kind of the generic, like anyone can go access them, because we'll have users beyond institutions that are signed up as administrators with the DMP Assistant and outside of the across sectors as well and such. So, but the value of being able to have any given institution and have that administrative role go in and really customize the guidance, for instance, is potentially huge. There are often resources and specific supports, and those are evolving, and they're available specifically at an institution for those researchers and not everyone. Or you may have, some areas that you're evolving and you want to promote, whatever the case might be, to be able to have that that guidance really specified within yours is fantastic. But then if folks want to go and use the Portage one at any point as well, that's okay too. And not every institution needs to take on every template either. They'll have that opportunity to choose. And again, those ones are really just starting to go, that we've got these 13 new ones. That's the start of something there. There's going to be more, and those ones will evolve as well.
Great, thanks. And I think that gets to the question that Kathleen has here. And Kathleen, if that didn't answer the question that you put here, please let me know. Which is, could these templates be in the reference documents? They're not. She can't see them in her profile. Just the generic template. And I think that that's a technical issue that. It sounds like that's a technical issue that we're still working out.
We've actually got that one figured out in our sandbox, so that that feature will be pushed through to production soon. It's just a matter of changing the visibility on the templates. So eventually all of the discipline and methodology specific templates will be available from the top ribbon under references. And then there's a public DMP templates tab. So that they'll all be available there very shortly.
Great. So that is coming.
Yes.
Just not quite yet.
We're getting there.
Great. And it looks like also sometimes the guidance hasn't been transferred. So I think if you have specific questions about your institution, I think the best thing to do would be to get in touch with Robin at the email address that she's provided or the support email address, and she can get you sorted out with those. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Another question here, can one use the DMP from another researcher from your institution?
Not unless they've been added as a collaborator, I don't think.
Okay. So someone would have to share it with you before you can.
Yes, there is the possibility of making a DMP public, but even then I don't think you can actually go in and edit it. You can view it if it's public, but I don't think you have editing privileges unless you're a collaborator.
Which seems fair.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of questions that were answered in typing. One is about spam users. And the response to that about spam users is that we're planning to implement a process to remove these spam users for all institutions. And we can have a discussion with Robin and others to decide whether this is something we should implement as a regular cleaning task.
Definitely. And on top of that, something else that is on our features wish list is kind of an authentication process or single sign-on for users via Shibboleth. This is something that will take a little more kind of technical and policy work even, but it's definitely something that's on our radar as far as trying to whittle down those spam accounts and then tighten up the account creation.
Right. And also a note that if someone has created a private DMP that's available to only the creator and the collaborators, that's not available to be seen by other people in the organization or by the public, but institutional administrators can see them.
Yes, but I believe, and Omar and Weiwei, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that institutional administrators can see the project details and some of the more administrative details, but I'm not sure that they can actually go in and see all of your answers, for example, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yes, I believe that is the case. I will need to double check just to make sure that that's the behavior, but my understanding is that the actual data itself is not available until it's made public.
Okay, and a question that just came up in the chat. Do we know when Shibboleth is coming? It's been in the works for a while.
I will, yeah, go ahead, Omar.
From a technical side, the Shibboleth connection is there. Right now, it's just a matter of configuration to make sure that it's communicating properly.
And I wanted to add that Shibboleth is not only the technical part, it's more working with your local institutions to make sure those we could get the right connections. So I think the piece on the DMP Assistant is actually a smaller part, but we will probably help you to make sure that this can be communicated to your central IT or whoever manage your authentication solutions to make sure those attributes we will need to make this connection happen available to the DMP Assistant. And I think that's a bigger roadblock or bigger piece that we need to figure out.
And I think there's a theme coming up, and it's a predictable one. Is that great? DMP Assistant's out there now. We have a big policy that's out there now. Things are moving, and everybody wants to do things, which is fantastic. But a little bit of time is going to be required to support all things across the board. And there is definitely a collaborative spirit to this, working with institutions. Things don't run themselves. So things like Shibboleth, we've actually had that for our DMP Assistant, landing page here at U of A, because we did some of that with a number of platforms across the board. It was a lot of, it was work at that time, but it supports it. So that's just an example. The big work that's coming to help support institutions is going to be the customization guide 2.0 work. It's happening currently. Working group is just starting to get up and running, but that stuff can't happen overnight either. So bear with us. I know that Robin will respond as best can to inquiries and such, though she's just one person as well. So, just kind of got a little bit of time. And this also goes to speak to, and I really want to highlight the value of the DMP Assistant Steering Committee. Again, we feel like we've got an infinite number of things we could work on and finite resources. And anytime you have that, you're going to find decision points needing to be made. And it makes sense to have a steering committee that's made of a wide range of users. We've got tri-agency folks on there. We've got community users, research representation community, host institution, Indigenous community. And that is really important to have that. So that's going to help us to identify priority work and to prioritize work. And sometimes that prioritization of work can be on end user needs, but sometimes we'll need to hear from technical folks that says, this might sound easy, but it's a lot harder, or that one's actually pretty easy. Let's get her done. So again, in a few months, I think if Robin was to be giving this presentation again, let's say in 6 months, a lot of this stuff is going to be completely updated and hopefully less questions about these because you're all implementing things.
There you go. We have a plan for 6 months from now. One last question, as we are just past the hour now. Could a researcher give access to their DMP to an administrator at their institution to get help with editing or revising or with questions?
Yeah, absolutely. There's the ability to set the visibility of the plan for within your organization, and you could easily flag the administrator from there. We do have a list of institutional RDM contacts in the Portage website that is linked throughout the templates. In addition, local admin have the ability to set up a request feedback option within their organizational profiles. So researchers could submit a form to request that someone speak to them about evaluating their or helping them out with their DMP. So a couple of options there.
I also wanted to add that the DCC community has, one of their priority is working on a review process or review workflow that will be becoming part of the tool so that it will be more streamlined for the researchers to trigger something for the administrator or whoever your contact will be, and then request a review and feedback loop. So we're keeping our eyes on that development and definitely wanted to leverage that and making sure that our use case will be reflected in that development process as well.
All right, well, we will end it on that question then. And I would like to thank Robin so much for her presentation today. That was a great overview. I mean, I've done some work on this project and I feel like I know more now than I did at the beginning of the presentation. And thanks as well to the U of A DMP Assistant team, James and Omar and Weiwei for helping us out today. As I mentioned, and I also wanted to thank Anthony, who's been our translator for these sessions, who's done a great job. Thank you so much to him. As I mentioned, this is our last Portage webinar under the Carl banner. So thank you all so much for coming out over the last year. We will be starting up again with Endrio in a little while. And James, you have your hand up.
No, I thought I was going to click on a celebration icon or something, but it's hand raised. So.
You interrupted my spiel, but that's okay. I'm just going to wrap it up then by saying, again, thank you all very much for coming. My colleagues asked me if I had last words for the end of this Carl portion, and I said, well, I guess it's one small step for Portage and one giant leap for the Canadian RDM community. But I think we can also say so long and thanks for all the data or fish, data fish. Take care. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks so much.